Autism. Your child has autism. No one wants to hear that, let alone believe there's any blessing in it. But years later, I would come to realize that Anthony's autism was a universal gift given to recover my life as I fought to recover his. I'm such a little storyteller these days, and I want to regale another tale. I got that line from the Titanic, my most quoted movie, a movie that I don't even like, but that'll be for another podcast. But I believe in premonitions and signs and things happening for a reason. So here's a story about one from a long time ago. Every Labor Day, the Jerry Lewis Telethon for Muscular Dystrophy was broadcast on TV when I was a child. This event was beyond intriguing for me. I found it incredible that Jerry Lewis and his gang of performers were going to stay up all through the night and that you could turn the TV on at any time. And there he would be, not only with his friends, not only dancing, they'd be singing and having a ball. And that exuberance was magical to me. And in between all of the singing and dancing, they had little vignettes of kids who were living with the disability. There they were in wheelchairs and their brave parents by their side. All Labor Day, the channel on the TV set would not be changed. That telethon would be on even if no one was actually in the house consistently watching it. It was as if Jerry was providing a break for when you wanted to come inside from your family activities. We used to go every Labor Day to my Uncle Rocco's, eating steak, drinking lemonade, playing badminton, and I would come in periodically by myself to sit and watch the telethon, soaking it all up, the singing, the dancing, and the kids. One year, when I was heading into my adolescence, I think I was probably about 13, 14, I was watching and there was a child speaking. And I remember knowing in that moment that I would have a disabled child one day. Looking back, I wasn't even sure that I knew what having a child actually meant. But I knew at that moment, my singing and dancing, figuratively and literally, would be focused on a child with a disability. You know, as we age, I've come to believe that if you are of an open mind and heart, you can see something of a mighty hand, of a creator, a higher power in your life. And once we can see that clearly, the connection to working with that higher power can become the great equalizer for our life for the rest of our days. I had the craziest pregnancy. I was 36 years old and having my first child. I envisioned the kind of pregnancy that you see on TV with cute little maternity clothes. And in those days, we were still wearing those cute little maternity apron style tops, the little dresses that I had seen in the Sears catalogs. That was the pregnancy I envisioned, carrying a child to 40 weeks and going through a few maladies, I guess. But what TV and the magazines were showing was kind of a fairy tale of sorts. And I, like many others, wanted that fairy tale. And when I found out I was expecting, I was on board for the most beautiful journey of my life. Without getting into too much medical detail, I had a condition that I found out exacerbated a very low statistic of women when they were pregnant. And I remember the doctor telling me, oh, you have this condition, but only a very, very small amount of women have complications with it. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, well, a low statistic, but I'm going to be in that number. And I was. By 20 weeks, my body thought it was ready to have a baby. And I began contractions. I actually remember being rushed to the emergency room and a nurse coming out and said, you're having contractions. And I remember saying to her, no, that can't possibly be because contractions happen, I'm telling the nurse, when you're having a baby. And she said, yeah, you're having a baby and we need to stop that from happening at this stage. I had no idea what these people were talking about, but I soon found out. I was quickly moved to a high-risk unit of the county hospital where many medications were given to find the right little cocktail to stop the contractions and to assure the doctors that they could at least get me to 28 weeks. Because although 28 weeks is quite early, gave me a much better chance for my child to survive. Up until that point, I did not want to find out the gender of my child. But I had to go through so many different tests in the hospital that when the doctor said to me, I can tell you what you're having, I decided to find out. I wanted to know. I wanted to know who I was dealing with. I wanted to feel like I was connected more profoundly to the child. When I found out it was a boy, we decided to name him Anthony early on. So I felt like everything I was now going to do going forward was for the life of my precious Anthony. So there I was in the county hospital from December 27th, 1994, until Anthony was born on February 9th, 1995, in a high-risk unit, on my back, only able to get up when I had to use the potty, which was 2 or 3 steps away from my bed. Welcome to the wild world of not having a TV fairy tale pregnancy. Anthony was born at 28 weeks. He weighed 2 pounds and 11 ounces, but never the need to put him on a respirator, which was a blessing. But he needed to remain in the special care nursery to learn how to suck the bottle and develop into a little guy who was able to come home. I left the hospital on February the 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to me. But in sorts, it was a happy Valentine's Day because I had my little guy. But the stress and the concern was not over. I wasn't well when I went home from an arduous C-section operation and wasn't allowed to see Anthony for close to 2 weeks because of concern that I would develop an infection and they did not want me in the nursery. A dad went, but it wasn't mom. There's something about a mom. I would have been there 24/7. And I was finally able to go to see Anthony in that 2-week period. That's exactly what I did. I was there, except for sleep time, every single day, helping the nurses with the feeding tube, helping him with the little exercise to learn to be able to drink on his own for his little lips to move correctly until he came home on March 20th. When he came home, he was a little under 5 pounds, but he was ready to conquer the world. It was really hard in the beginning because he was so tiny and it was hard to feed him. He felt so fragile. And I was completely consumed in worry and stress. But Dad was a good partner in caring for Anthony, and we relied on each other. I didn't have a typical support system of other friends had. I didn't have parents close by. I didn't have the typical mom comes to stay for 3 weeks kind of thing. That didn't happen for me. But Anthony was flourishing, and all of the milestones that you're supposed to hit, he began to hit on time. He lifted his head at the right time, and he was sitting up at the right time. He was a jovial little guy, gaining lots of weight. He wasn't the best sleeper, I remember. He wouldn't sleep unless I sat by his crib and held his hand. He loved the Chipmunks Christmas album. We had it on a cassette. He wanted to hear the Chipmunks Christmas song over and over and over, and would make a little gagging sound with his throat if you didn't put it right back on after it went through a couple times in the loop. But aside from those little oddities that you can chalk up to basic infant development, I started to think I was going to get my TV show child-rearing years. Fancying myself as a Carol Brady or a Claire Huxtable. I was ready to roll. In the early years, I went to work. I was teaching. My husband had a small contracting business, so he would be home with Anthony until I got home. And then he would go to work. Our plan was when Anthony was 3, we were going to enroll him in this little church preschool, a little preschool for a couple of hours in the morning for some socialization. And by the time he was 4, he would be in the full day preschool and we would begin our typical suburban parent mode. I'm laughing here because if you've been listening to all of my podcasts, isn't it interesting how I have all of these plans of what's going to happen and then none of these things end up happening? As we approached 18 months, 19 months, in the back of my mind, I started to feel like something wasn't right with Anthony's development. But it's interesting when you think that something might be off in the development of your child, instead of the logical planning that should occur, you decide to rationalize that what you are seeing isn't what you are seeing. And somehow you begin a little bit of a process of denial. So why do we parents do this? Because in clearer thinking times, if someone asked you, what would you do if you thought your child was ailing in any way? You would instinctively answer with, oh, the conviction of searching for any means possible to cure or help with whatever was amiss with your precious child. But here you are facing your worst fear, and you begin to rationalize and deny. I think we love our children so much that the mere thought of anything being off sets us into a tailspin because the truth is just too painful to face. So Anthony's dad and I began concocting reasons for what appeared to be an odd, quirky development. I mean, he seemed happy at home. He smiled and laughed, and he ran to us. And when we threw the ball to him, he went after it, and he ran back to us or ran away. It didn't matter. That was good enough for us. And anyway, I decided the only reason he doesn't know what to do at the playground is because he doesn't have siblings or a real friend to teach him or model from. So he's afraid of the slide. He's still little. Remember, he was a preemie. He just hasn't caught up yet. I will teach him what to do. But there wasn't any real play emerging. But I didn't even realize that. And since all of his physical milestones were being met, the pediatrician didn't really notice anything either. At a checkup, he would ask me how Anthony was doing, and I would say, fine. I started to say, I don't hear much language. He's not talking, and the doctor never seemed concerned. Boys are late talkers, they would say. And I had plenty of friends who knew someone who didn't say a word until they were 4 or 5. One friend told me, Einstein didn't talk until he was 5. And his immediate circle thought he had a learning disability. So I was content thinking my son could be Einstein. But by the summer, around 28 months or so, Anthony's demeanor was beginning to change. When we called him, he didn't look. So then I thought he couldn't hear. That's it. He can't hear. This is the problem, and we're going to fix it. Maybe there's even an operation or something that could fix it. I mean, not hearing is not a small thing, but it's in the mainstream. Somehow there's an answer for this. I could be the parent of a hearing challenged child, I thought. And maybe his hearing wouldn't end up being all that impaired. My mind was spinning in a million different illogical directions. And we mentioned it to the pediatrician, and he set us up for a hearing examination. And he tested fine. And when we got those results, we had an odd mix of joy and disappointment flooding through the both of us. But around this time, my husband was in a worse place than I was in the spirit of denial. Now finding out that Anthony's hearing was tested and he got a double thumbs up, that was it for him. He and my dad made a little allyship and decided there was nothing wrong with Anthony. There would be no more talk of it. Anthony was a preemie, he was a little slower on the developmental rate, and so case closed. But that case closed was for him, but not for me. My mommy instinct was now gnawing out from the shield of denial that I had surrounded myself with. And then the cracks were beginning. The cracks in my husband's demeanor, the cracks in our marriage, the cracks in our reality, the cracks in my dreams, the cracks in our life. By age 2.5, Anthony's behavior was laced with odd quirks, things I just couldn't put my finger on at first. I'll begin with his toy choices. He didn't want a cuddly bear or a doll. He liked to carry around a gray-colored nutcracker that was dressed like a mailman. He spotted this in my dad's collection of nutcrackers. And once he grabbed it, he never let it go. And I mean never. He never did anything with the nutcracker. The nutcracker didn't interact with others or even with himself. He never hugged it. He never fed it. He just held it. And to try to take it away from him resulted in a God forbid tantrum. He also liked little Fisher-Price collection called the Little People. He never pretended to do anything with them either, but he wanted to hold them or line them up and look at them. He would roll a truck back and forth, but he never pretended to make the truck go anywhere. He also liked to see the wheel spin underneath. He loved magnetic letters and numbers that you put on the refrigerator, and he quickly learned the skill of putting them in order. And this was a skill that would serve him well in his later years. And originally, that little skill made me feel okay. He liked puzzles and shapes. He loved crayons, but he rarely made a picture of anything and never seemed interested in creating a scene. He liked to scribble and he liked to see the color, but mostly he liked to line up the crayons. He liked to line up the colors in an order. He liked to watch TV and he loved the Barney series. He loved kids that were singing and dancing, but his ultimate favorite was the Peanuts gang, the Charlie Brown gang. He began learning the script to each video. Now, albeit in a very babbling style, no real pronunciation. He could recite in a sing-sing kind of manner every sentence along with the videos. And oddly, he wanted to repeat those scripts over and over and over again, even when he was away from the TV. He wanted to see certain things over and over again as well. He figured out how to rewind the VHS tapes over and over again. And I saw that he was enjoying that. There was personality in there and there was laughter. I felt like there was a child within that child. I just didn't know how to get him out more. He also loved my mother. She used to engage him by acting goofy and using these two little stuffed toys that we still have to this day on his dresser. She would take these two little stuffed toys and make them dance and pretend that they were talking, and she would go around the corner and pop in the door and surprise him with the two toys, and he really enjoyed that. And my instinct was to capitalize on that. So one day, while Anthony was napping, we made a video of Grandma. She was using the stuffed toys to engage him, as well as teaching him some words and sentences. Later on, I would come to find out that this was a real thing. The term was called video modeling, that is used with children for developmental disabilities. Felt kind of validated when I found that out. I thought I invented that. But this wouldn't be the last time my instincts would prove valuable for Anthony's progress. Anthony loved the Grandma video, and he began to repeat what she was teaching him. He loved watching, and the repetition of the video made him realize some skills that he would even try in his own real life. He mimicked her demonstration of throwing the ball, and I could see it began to make him make his ball throwing a little more intentional. And her crayon instruction helped him focus a little more on actually drawing objects. But typical development was truly eluding him. And I began to be extremely determined to find out what was going on. I went back to my What to Expect When You Are Expecting book. Usually get that when you're expecting a child, because I'd remembered in the end of the book itself, there was a section on special needs children. When I opened the chapter, autism jumped out at me. And although the entire description didn't sound 100% like Anthony, I couldn't get past it. Turns out, once I started talking about it, a lot of my close friends knew somebody in their family or in their friend base who had a child that was diagnosed with autism. I found out a very close friend of mine had a cousin whose child had autism. And when I spoke with her, she didn't really seem to have many similarities between her cousin and Anthony. But she said a couple of key points that made me think I need a little more information. That conversation sent me to the bookstore. And then the search began. There were only a handful of books on the topic, and I bought a few just to gain some insight. The first book I read scared the living daylights out of me. It was very clinical, yet a very insightful book, void of any touchy-feely, good pat on the back emotion. But that wasn't what frightened me. What frightened me was how spot on some of the descriptions and idiosyncratic behaviors of Anthony were in that book. It was there that I learned about hand leading, where a child will take the hand of a person to place it on the object of what they want or what they want done, such as opening a door or turning on a TV. Anthony was always doing that. I originally thought that was a plus. It also spoke about the natural activity of pointing. Pointing, I didn't know, is nonverbal communication. When a person points, the intrinsic knowledge is that the other person understands what you want without verbal conversation. There's a theory of mind there. The pointing is the conversation. Anthony hand-led. Anthony never pointed. And lack of parallel play, lack of social play, difficulty in developing imitation, lack of understanding people's emotions, lack of understanding people's feelings, lack of a true theory of mind, and very sparingly use of language. I was swimming in detailed descriptions of my precious little boy. And there were lots of charts and diagnostic testing criteria. So I was frantically reading my way to find any criteria for the least impaired, praying that Anthony would fall under something that wasn't all that bad, something terrible. I felt like there had to be a mistake, but it was all staring me right in the face. But I was still searching to prove that everything was all right. And then the strangest paragraph of all. There was a description of a little boy with autism that carried around what was described in the book as a smooth wooden Russian carved doll, the Nutcracker. When I read that paragraph, I could feel the nausea, the dizziness, the lack of breath. I felt like I was in a bubble, one where I could only hear ringing in my ears. I forcefully shut the book. I put it on the coffee table. I picked it up. I opened it. I read it. I shut the book. I walked away. I returned. I picked it up. I opened it up. Pandora's box had been opened and nothing was going to be the same. But don't despair. I'll see you next time at the Wish House.